All right, gang. Good morning. Good morning. Let's get started. Russ, thank you so much for the great meditative music. It's always good to take that time. So, gang, I'm hoping that you're using that time to really write down your thoughts, to write down your intentions, your goals, your gratitudes. It's very critical to our mental and emotional state to take those proactive approaches. In fact, it's really one of the things I want to talk about today is just the way in which we operate on a day-to-day basis mentally. So. I don't know if you watched the Super Bowl yesterday, but talk about an historic game. Whether you're a fan of Tom Brady or not, it's amazing what he has accomplished. The guy, 43 years of age and playing in the Super Bowl. Nobody's played a Super Bowl at that age, and not to mention broken the records that he has. A guy who has 7 MVPs. 7 Super Bowls and 5 MVPs. And, at the age of 43, it just speaks to the idea of possibilities, gang. So a shout out to the old guy, for going out there and showing what can be done with experience and really ultimately believe. I don't know what drives Tom Brady. Some of you may know his career more and what he has said on what has caused him to become the champion that he is. Whether it was a promise to his father, his mother, maybe it was he's just highly competitive. I don't know what it is, but I do understand this. What I understand is that this guy has a deep sense of purpose. And I want to emphasize that word, a deep sense of purpose. You cannot do what a Tom Brady did yesterday and what he's done for a total of 7 times. No one else has done that. The next closest, I believe, is 5 Super Bowls. He's won 7 Super Bowls. It's crazy, and he's continuing to do it at an age that people would say it's not possible. And it really, gang, it comes down to this word. There's no question. It comes down to the word purpose. And again, I don't know what his purpose is, but I do know this. He has one. You have to perform at that level consistently and defy the odds to do what people don't expect to have happen. I looked up the word definition or the word purpose and looked at its definition. This is the definition, and I wrote it down. It's the reason something is done or created, or for which something exists. Now, let me repeat that. The reason something is done or created, or for which something exists. I'm interested in that last part, or the reason for which something exists. Einstein was asked this question: why does man, idiomatic man, human beings, why do they exist? In other words, what's their purpose? See, I think we all know, whether we recognize it intellectually, consciously all the time, but we certainly know it innately, that people who have a purpose tend to do better. It's one of the things that's written in Man's Search for Meaning, a phenomenal book on the idea of those who have purpose not only can survive, but can thrive. You take a look at a Tom Brady, there's no question he has a great sense of purpose. He has a reason for which he wants to exist, not just get by, but to actually to excel, to be an example that's beyond, I think, sometimes measure, beyond comprehension. So I just want to go back to that definition again in terms of what purpose really is. The reason something is done or created, or for which something exists. So the question I have for you is, why do you exist? Just pause for a second. I want you to contemplate that question. Why do I exist? Do you exist just to get by? Do you exist just to pay the bills? Pay the car payment? To make sure you got enough money for gas, for insurance? Do you exist just to make enough money to make a house payment? To be able to put food on the table? Do you exist just for that? Just to get by? Just to survive? See, so many people do. The vast majority of humanity, they exist just to get by. And I'm not being critical, gang. It's just that I want us all to recognize that life has so much more purpose if we'll just simply give it that purpose. You know, we have to recognize it. We got to slow down and stop on a conscious level and ask, what is the reason for which I exist? What do I intend to do with this gift that I have been given? I don't know anything about Tom Brady. I really don't. I don't know about him as a human being, you know, how he is off the gridiron. But I got to believe that the passion that he exhibits on the gridiron is matched by the passion by which he lives privately. I want you to think about that. The passion that he exhibits on the gridiron is matched by the passion by which he lives off the gridiron. I am certain of that. I don't need to know anything about him, but I'm certain of that. And my question for you is, where are you existing on this plane of existence? Where are you? Are you a person of absolute passion? See, I believe that there are two primary emotions in life, gang. Only two. You think about all the emotions we can feel, you know, on a day-to-day basis: happiness, sadness, anxiety, anger, hatred, regret, all of these emotions that we can feel. At the end of the day, there are only two primary overarching emotions: love and fear. Those are the two ruling, I guess I would call them like the monarchs of emotions. Those are the two: love and fear. And I believe that those two emotions really create two different types of people: ordinary people and extraordinary people. Or, said alternatively, victims and then victors. I mean, it goes without saying, if I were to ask the question, is Tom Brady a victim or is he a victor? I mean, the guy undoubtedly is a victor, not just because he won the game yesterday, but you just take a look at the way he approaches the game overall and then his personal life. And again, I don't know anything about his personal life. All I know is that he's got to have his act together there in order to achieve to the level that he does in his professional career. So the question I want to ask you is this: if we acknowledge and understand, if we're willing to admit that there are only two primary emotions, love and fear, my question for you is, where do you exist on a day-to-day basis, on a moment-by-moment basis? See, are you that victim or are you the victor? Are you the person who has identified the reason for which they exist and then go about their day marshaling everything that they have mentally, physically, emotionally towards that end? Because see, what I know about Tom Brady is this: that he takes every ounce of what he has in him and puts it towards that purpose for which he exists, whether it's on the gridiron or off. Because you don't end up living the life that he lives without doing that. You just don't. His success is not an accident. It is by design. So I want to ask you this question: do you think by design? Do you countenance or allow your thoughts by design, intentionally? Not willy-nilly, not just because things happen that you perceive and therefore you, like a leaf in the wind, blow wherever the wind blows you. I have to tell you, in life, gang, winds are always blowing, and sometimes they're crazy winds, like hurricane force winds, right? And if we're not anchored, if we're not certain, if we don't know the reason for which we exist, we could be blown around like a leaf in the wind to any direction out of our control. As I said, there are only two primary emotions: love and fear. Those who are living a life of fear really don't ultimately care where they end up as long as they get away from their fears. Well, here's what I know. I want you to think about this. I want you to put yourself in that box of comfort that we all live in. Our comfort zone. I want you to put yourself in that comfort zone in terms of your personal life, your relationships, as well as your business, the things that you are okay doing, that ultimately every day, these are the things that you're willing to do. Put yourself in that frame of mind. Now what I want you to do is imagine all the things that you're afraid to do, that you know that you should be doing in order to live your best life, in order to live the life that you want. In other words, to really live a life of extreme existence, to live a life like a Tom Brady does, at least on the gridiron, right? Because we have evidence that he lives at a very high level there, right? Are you ultimately living a life that is controlled by the thoughts that consciously, if you were to step back and ask yourself, am I countenancing those? Am I allowing those thoughts to control my life? So just think about this. Love and fear, those are the only two emotions. You have an opportunity every single day to live in this box of fear. I don't want to go out of my comfort zone. I say I want to live this life. I want to have a lot of production. I want to earn a lot of money in real estate. I want to bless a lot of lives. I want to be able to go on these great vacations, have this nice house, have a lot of money in the bank. I don't want to have to worry about the day to day, but I want to be able to see the future and know that it's going to be taken care of for me and my family, and also for strangers I don't know, because I want to be philanthropic. All of those things. See, all of those things are outside of our comfort zone. Tom Brady, he is really good at getting outside of his comfort zone. See, prior to yesterday, he had never won 7 Super Bowls. He'd won 6. And prior to that, he had only won 5. 6. Prior to that, he'd only won 4. Prior to that, 3, 2, 1. Prior to that, none. What I know is this. For him to be on that pathway and that trajectory and to get to where he is, in the very beginning, he got out of his comfort zone. And every step of the way, he got out of his comfort zone because he asked of himself and had expectations of himself to do things that he had never done before. So my question for you is this: how good are you? How willing are you to get out of your comfort zone and stop living a life of fear and live one of love or passion? That is the defining difference, the key defining differentiating characteristic of people who are average and those who are extraordinary. See, we don't have to have a conversation with Tom Brady. We don't have to do a post-game breakdown, dissect it, and say, Tom, what was going through your mind? We know. He was absolutely certain he was going to win. He knew that he is a victor. He saw it in his mind. As a result, it manifested. Not out of some ethereal, mystic magic. When I say manifest, I mean he was in the right frame of mind, therefore he was in the right physical state, and therefore he acted accordingly and got what champions get, what victors get. So I just simply ask you, when we know that there are only 2 primary emotions, love and fear, which one do you choose? Which one do you choose practically? I know intellectually what we would say in this setting, this conversation, we would all say, I choose love. I choose a purpose. I choose to be extraordinary. But that's not my question. My question for you is, practically on a day-to-day basis, which one are you choosing? That's the real question, and that's the real answer. Now, for some of you, you're going to say, I choose to be a victor. I exemplify that on a daily basis, which is great. And then for some of us, man, there's room for improvement. There is. In fact, I believe for all of us, there's room for improvement. There always is. So which one do you choose? To be a victim or a victor? To be average or to be extraordinary? Now, what is your purpose? Have you identified that? What is your reason for existence? You know, Martin Luther King, it was interesting. After the assassination of John F. Kennedy in the early 60s, he told his wife that John Kennedy's fate, being assassinated, was his fate. He knew. He said to Coretta Scott King, he said, that's my fate. that is what's going to happen to me. Now think about that. Martin Luther King knew, he said to his own wife, that is going to happen to me. That is my fate. Imagine that. Imagine being willing to acknowledge that and to see that and to believe that. And despite that, despite knowing that what you're doing is going to lead to your demise, you still do it. Because see, Martin Luther King had something that he absolutely believed in. He had identified the reason for which he existed, and therefore accomplished things that nobody had prior to that point. He mobilized an entire nation to a trajectory that it wasn't necessarily headed. He changed the lives of millions, and quite frankly, probably billions in the world. See, he accomplished that not because he was afraid, but because he was driven by his passion, by love. So, gang, I want to finish with this. I want to give you like a call to action, like practically, John. Okay, I understand this academically. I understand the conversation. This makes sense to me. But where does the rubber meet the road? How do I actually take a hold of this? How do I become this person of passion? How do I become a person who's controlled not by my fears, but by my desires, my passions, by love? I mean, that's the money question? How do I stop living a life through fear and rather one through love, through desire? Well, let me give you just some practical steps or some thoughts that at least that I use in my daily life. Number one, recognize your emotions. Gang, I want you to write this down. This is it's gold and it's practical. And if you'll do this, I promise you, it will dramatically shift the way in which you think, the way you feel, and the way you act, and therefore the outcome that you get. In other words, your reality. Instantly, it will on a day-to-day basis. Number one, recognize your emotions. Recognize your emotional state. See, I believe that the more consistently we are aware of our mental, emotional state, then therefore, the more consistently we can adjust it and make improvements to it. Because like anything in life, it's going to get off track. It's going to devolve into something we don't want it to be. So therefore, we have to recognize it constantly. So what I'm suggesting is that you've got to get in the habit of asking yourself, how do I feel? Ask that question, how do I feel? See, if you'll ask yourself that question, listen to the answer. I feel confident. I feel amazing, powerful, or I feel weak. I feel not enough. I feel rejected. I feel sad. I feel tired. Start by asking how you feel mentally, physically, emotionally. Recognize your emotional state. That's step number one. Step number two, ask yourself, why am I feeling this way? Whatever the answer is, ask yourself that question. Why do I feel this way? It's critical. See, what I understand is this, that whatever emotional state that you're in that emotional state because of the thoughts that you are allowing to rent space in your mind. So ask yourself that question, why do I feel this way? Because what you're going to do is you're going to identify the thoughts that you are giving space to in your brain. You've heard me say this probably a million times, that the average person has 60,000 thoughts. 60,000, believe it or not. And the vast majority of those thoughts are negative. So recognize more consistently how you feel, and then therefore what you're thinking about. The most important conversation that any of us will ever have is the conversation that we have with ourselves. Are you paying attention to that conversation that you have with yourself on a daily basis subconsciously? See, most people don't. Most people aren't aware consciously of the conversation they have with themselves in their own brain, and therefore live an average life. A life that is controlled by and immersed in fear. The average person, 75% of them work a job that they absolutely hate, that they do not like, that they would change. And yet they don't. 75% of people. Here's an interesting statistic. 75% of millionaires love what they do. They love what they do. And you might say, well, gosh, John, if I were making millions of dollars a year, I'd love my job too. It doesn't work that way. They weren't making millions when they started. They were living a life of passion, living in abundance, living with thoughts of positivity, of power, of love, of purpose. And because of that, they became very successful financially, and in most cases, very successful in all of the other arenas that we would quantify as or count as success, relationships and health, because they all bleed into one another. So number one, recognize your emotional state. How do I feel? Number two, ask yourself the question, why do I feel this way? And then write down the answers. Understand, if you do not feel confident, you feel sad or weak or angry, write down the reasons why you feel that way, because there are reasons. Do not accept the answer, I don't know, because that's a BS answer. It's somebody who's afraid of the truth. Ask the question, identify why, because the first step to recovery is an admission. Identify why you feel that way. And write it down. Put it in black and white on a piece of paper, on your journal. Identifying, these are my thoughts, and this is why I feel this way. I'm allowing these negative thoughts to rent space in my limited space in my brain. I only got so much space in there, and I am giving space to all of these negative thoughts. And then step number 4, this is what I want you to do. I want you to rewrite those negative statements. Years ago, I did this. Years ago, I recognized that I had these negative thoughts that consistently, there usually aren't too many negative thoughts. The problem with them is that we repeat them over and over and over and over again, like a script. And then we operate on automatic pilot. We don't need to consciously recognize it. The subconscious mind takes control, and it's the operating system now. And I recognized I was doing that, and I had to reprogram that. I had to get rid of the bugs. So I wrote down these things. What am I thinking? Why am I thinking it? And then I rewrote the thoughts. I changed the conversation with myself from you're not enough, you'll never do it, it's not possible, to I am enough. That as long as I do what successful people do, I'll be successful. That I'm not nervous, that I'm not anxious, that I'm calm, I'm comfortable, and I'm relaxed. It's one of my mantras. I'm calm, I'm comfortable, and I'm relaxed. And when I say it again, I can't help but smile, and I don't force it, it actually comes out because I've reprogrammed my brain. That's my thought. That's what I identify with. So number 1, recognize your emotions. Ask yourself, number 2, why do I feel this way? Number 3, write down the reasons why you feel that way. Number 4, rewrite those negative statements into something that is positive. You're the author of your own book, your book of life, your life. So why would you write it negative? Write it positive. Rewrite it now. And then step number 5 is stay close to that new story. Stay close to it. See, it's going to take time to reprogram. See, you've rewritten it, but now you've got to reprogram. In other words, you've got to make certain that you change your behavior, that you get out of that rut that you're in terms of those negative emotions, living in fear, and get into a new rut, a rut of positivity, of purpose, of passion, of a clearly positive reason for which reasons for which you exist. In other words, reprogram, rewrite it consciously. And that is the key here, gang, consciously. All of this, these steps 1 through 5, are about taking this from the darkness, the shadows of your subconscious mind, and putting them into the forefront, the conscious mind, where you take control. The real living, breathing, conscious human being who wants to live their best life. Gang, I would recommend that you take a 3x5 card, and on one side of that 3x5 card, write down your predominant negative thoughts, and then on the reverse of that 3x5 card, rewrite those negative statements, and then keep that card with you. And on a daily basis, what I want you to do is I want you to ask yourself, how do I feel? as often as you can remember yourself. And if you have to set alarms where you're asking yourself that question 3, 4, 5, 6, 8 times a day, set alarms on your phone that just simply reads, how do I feel? So when the alarm goes off, you ask yourself, how do I feel? First step, remember, recognize your emotional state. How do I feel? Second step, why do I feel that way? You're recognizing the thoughts that you have in your mind. And then you look at your card and you say, yeah, I'm having that negative conversation with myself. What's the conversation I should be having? Flip over the 3x5 card and rewrite it. Say it over and over again. See, what we have to do is we've got to reprogram what goes on up here. What I know is this, that each one of us, each one of you can be your own version of Tom Brady in the life that you want to live. You can be that Super Bowl champion. You can be that MVP. You can be that person who breaks records, both personal and others. See, it isn't written anywhere that you can't. But where it is written and what is written is that you got to follow the rules. See, if Tom Brady woke up every day and said, well, I know what the rules are to the game of football, both off the gridiron and on the gridiron, but I'm not going to follow those. I'm going to violate the rules. He wouldn't be a champion. He wouldn't be in the NFL. He'd be off living an average life, obscure life, where nobody's going to talk about it, where no one's inspired by him. Gang, every one of you is capable of being an MVP, a champion. Just don't ignore the rules of success. Consciously pay attention to these things. And on a daily basis, be willing to get outside of your comfort zone, exist there, because it's only in that space, outside of your comfort zone, where you are going to live your best life and you too will be a champion. Okay, gang, let's finish this up with some closing affirmations. I'm glad you joined us here for the first day of the week.